All right, welcome to Rewatch or Return, the podcast where we put movies through the ultimate test across 10 universal categories to decide, does it call for a definite rewatch, a definite trip to the return bin, or does our subjectivity cause it to fall somewhere in between? This week, we are looking at ENCINO MAN from 1992. With that said, we're going to jump right into Fast Forward Facts. Let's rewind to the early 90s, a time of flannel shirts, VHS rentals, and the golden age of ridiculous teen comedies. Released in 1992, ENCINO MAN, or California Man in some countries, gave the world a caveman, a few catchphrases, and one of the weirdest glow-ups in high school history. The film stars Sean Astin and Pauly Shore as two California teens, Dave and Stoney, who accidentally dig up a frozen caveman in their backyard while trying to build a pool. When the ice thaws, out pops Brendan Fraser in his first major film role as the prehistoric but lovable Link. They clean him up, take him to school, and teach him how to survive the wildest environment of all, suburban Los Angeles in the 90s. Directed by Les Mayfield and produced by Hollywood Pictures, ENCINO MAN was a low-budget comedy made for around $7 million, but it became a surprise hit, grossing over $40 million worldwide. Critics weren't sure what to make of it, but teenage audiences ate it up like a microwave burrito. Brendan Fraser's performance as Link is what makes the movie click. He didn't just play a caveman, he committed to it, learning specific physical movements, expressive grunts, and even studying animal documentaries to capture that evolving human vibe. This breakout role launched Fraser's career, leading to hits like School Ties, George of the Jungle, and The Mummy. And of course, you can't talk ENCINO MAN without mentioning Pauly Shore. At his most wheeze the juice self, this was peak Shore era, full of Southern Cal slang, neon outfits, and pure surfer dude chaos. His ad-libbed one-liners and exaggerated persona basically carried MTV culture straight into the movie theaters. A fun behind-the-scenes fact, the movie was filmed in and around real Los Angeles high schools, including Encino's Birmingham High, and many of the extras were actual local students. There's also a blink and you'll miss it cameo from Rose McGowan in her first film role, and an uncredited appearance by Ben Stiller in early test footage that never made the final cut. And here's a neat bit of continuity trivia. ENCINO MAN actually sparked a mini-shared universe of goofy caveman comedies. Brendan Fraser's character Link shows up again in Son-in-Law in 1993 and in the Army Now in 1994, both starring Pauly Shore, officially making Link the only prehistoric cinematic cameo king of the 1990s. Love it or cringe at it, ENCINO MAN is pure time capsule fun, a movie that captures the neon-soaked, slang-filled spirit of its decade. So whether you're rewatching for nostalgia or the nugs, it's still one of the most totally wheezed comedies of its era. All right, with that down, let's take a look at what the critics had to say about ENCINO MAN. Looking at the top 10 critic reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, and actually, again, like a previous episode, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so there's 9. There's not actually 10 top critic reviews on here. There's plenty of critic reviews, but like picking the top ones, these are your, your fancy highfalutin critic names, or people that are, well known, or whatever you want to call it. They are considered top critics by Rotten Tomatoes, is all I'm saying. There's only 9 of them on here on this particular film. So let's take a look at them and see what they have to say. First of all, tomato meter is at 17%, so they pretty well hated it. I'm just going to let you know going into, before we even read these, there's not a single one of them that's positive. They all are negative reviews. But yeah, the critics gave it a 17%, which is awful. But popcorn meter's at 56, so it's, way bigger difference in how audiences went to see this film versus the people that were critiquing it as film critique experts, or whatever you want to call it, film critics. So let's see what they had to say. Starting off with Hugo Davenport from Daily Telegraph, says, "The warp factor of Shore's customized California dialect goes well beyond Wayne's World. In fact, I found it as inscrutable as the reason why anyone at all should go see this movie, save for Brendan Fraser's lumbering enthusiasm as Link." Sheila Johnston from The Independent says the film school of Bob and Ted and Wayne and Garth, but inferior in all regards, illustrates the theory of reverse evolution. Lawrence Cohn from Variety says low-budget quickie is insulting even within its own no-effort parameters. Time Out there's no person's name, but from Time Out here, it says, depressingly witless. Karen James from New York Times says, the real question is whether Dave and Stoney and Link are worthy heirs to Bill and Ted or Wayne and Garth. Not really. And then Peter Travers from the Rolling Stone says, God help us all. And then Desson Thompson from the Washington Post says, Encino Man saves its worst for last, especially with life lessons about being yourself. Mark Savlov from the Austin Chronicle says, I found myself missing Jeff Spicoli. A little Fast Times at Ridgemont High nod there. Hal Henson from the Washington Post, the kind of movie that gives evolution a bad name. And that is what your critics said about Encino Man. Goodness gracious. Dude said, God help us all. Man. Okay. Moving right along to First Time or 50th. This is one of those movies that there's like an oddness to this because I have such memories of watching this, while at the same time this is not something I watched a ton. I feel like when this movie first came out, it was extremely popular and it was watched a bunch in my household. Probably watched a bunch by my older sister, which means I probably sat with my mom and my older sister and watched this movie a lot when it first came out. But then over the years, it got progressively more spaced out in its watching, or in being watched by me, at least around our place. It was not a movie that we ever had growing up. I don't think it was nothing that was necessarily in our household, but I would watch it on TV from time to time. So it's like it's weird. If I feel like I've seen this movie a ton, but if I really stop and think about it, I haven't. So I mean, I've seen it. I own it now, but I've probably seen it. I don't know. I'm gonna say I've seen this movie 12, 15 times since 1992. So nothing crazy. As far as the times that I've sat and watched this movie from the beginning to the end, that's just my guess. Moving along to be continued. Would a sequel work for this film? And if there is a sequel, should there have been? Okay, so here's the thing. I think that the way that this movie set up the ending, I don't think there should be a sequel. I think that the movie was silly enough. It was meant to be a particular thing, and I don't think that was meant to be a thing that had anything else that you could squeeze out of it or wring out of it. I think it was meant to be what it was, and they gave you that little nod there at the end where Blink's caveman girlfriend shows up, and so because of that, like, you could continue and go, okay, now what's the story going to be like with him trying to show her around and them both trying to get like a handle on like modern day California or 90s California at the time the film was made, whatever. You could do that, but I wouldn't personally do it. I don't think it'd been worthwhile, and it probably wouldn't. I just don't think it would have been the same. It'd have been trying too hard probably, and sort of flopped, or been a thing that people would have continued to go through the years and say, well, they probably shouldn't have made that movie. All right, before we jump into the final segment, today's episode is brought to you by PrepStartsNow.com, your go-to spot for emergency and outdoor preparedness. If you're anything like me, you'd rather be prepared and need it than need the essentials and not have them. From 72-hour emergency essentials to camping gear, car emergency essentials, multi-tools, first aid, and even home gardening supplies as you start to grow some of your own food, they've got you covered for all of it. And the best part is, as a listener, you can use the promo code REWATCH to get 15% site-wide discount. And you'll also be helping out the show as they give us a small reward for your business in the process. Head to PrepStartsNow.com/discount/rewatch. That's PrepStartsNow.com/discount/rewatch, or simply enter the code REWATCH at checkout and get prepared today. Moving right into, I guess, a quick recap. There's not a lot to recap here. There's a lot to be said that we'll dig a little bit more into on the rest of this. But, the recap of this film is essentially two buddies who are not necessarily the cool guys at school, but Sean Astin's character is digging a pool in his backyard, and in the process of digging a pool, he initially comes across a bowl that's like sort of like this ancient looking, pottery bowl, and they're like, oh wow, he gets the bowl and they're kind of checking it out, and like, this thing looks really old, and I wonder how long it's been buried here and all this. And then he ends up like tripping and loses the bowl, and the bowl flies in the air, and he goes diving after it. But when he dives after it, the place where he lands, he realizes there is a block of ice underneath the dirt. Which earlier in the film they were talking about the Cro-Magnon man, or whatever you want to call it, and glaciers, and how that area there's a lot of expected to be a lot of frozen stuff underneath it. And they kind of go into the setup early in the movie in the classroom, but ultimately they dig the ice thing out. They can see through there that there's a person in there. They dig the ice thing out of the pool. They take it to the shed and they put it on sawhorses, and they have it thawing out with like little space heaters and things. While they are gone to school, I believe they're gone to school when it happens, they come home and he has thawed out and he's gone inside, and it is Brendan Fraser, and he's muddy and nasty and dirty, and he has no idea what's going on. He's a caveman who's been frozen for all these years, and he's freaking out, and they're freaking out, and the place is dirty, and so all of a sudden it becomes this whole process of like cleaning him up and making him look sort of like he belongs, and they're dressing him like they would dress themselves, and then throughout the course of the movie, Sean Astin is wanting to be cool, and he wants this particular girl that he has a crush on to go to the prom with him. And then there's a guy who's kind of the bully jock who bullies him and treats him bad, and the girl's not really interested in him. But they call Brendan Fraser's caveman character Linkovich Chomsky, something like that. And they enroll him in school, and now he starts going to school. And in the process of all this, he doesn't really care or have a clue what's going on, and everybody kind of thinks that's cool. So he kind of becomes the cool guy. They say that he's a foreign exchange student. So he's the cool guy, foreign exchange student who doesn't really speak English, who really doesn't care about anything and doesn't have a clue what's going on. And because of that, everybody's like, this guy's so his own thing, and that's so cool. And so now he's the popular guy. And now Stoney and Dave are kind of sort of becoming popular too because of Link. And the girls are interested in Link, and in time it goes from them being glad about Link, and they're trying to keep the secret, but they're like glad that it's sort of making them cool, to the point that the girl that Dave is crushing on she wants to go to the prom with Link. And then he's upset about all this stuff because he's mad that Link is kind of ruining his life, or taking sort of stepping on his toes, I guess, if you want to call it, even though he's not trying to. So it becomes this whole thing about friends, and they have a little fight where Stoney tries to tell Dave, who is trying to send Link off, basically like walking by himself, all right, see you later, like have a good life, but you got to get out of mine, kind of thing. Stoney shows up and they have a big fight, and then ultimately they realize, like, hey, we're friends, and friends don't do this, and friends don't run each other off for these other reasons, and friends don't put all this other stuff above their friends. And so ultimately it gets to the end of the film. Link is going to the prom with Robin. The jock guys have gone through all this digging to try to figure out exactly what Dave and Stoney are hiding, and they come to find out after sneaking in his house that he is a caveman. They have these Polaroid pictures to prove it, and now they go to prom and they're going to try to tell everybody about it. And so Robin's jock jerk boyfriend, ex-boyfriend guy, tells everybody he's a caveman. He's got the pictures. He punches Dave. Link doesn't like it. He picks the guy up and throws him off the stage into the cake. Everybody kind of really doesn't care. You know, they like Link. They don't really care what he is, or if he's a caveman, or even they don't really even necessarily take the guy serious for what he's saying about him. But everything's happy and fine at the end. Friends are all friends. Robin appreciates Dave for what he did for Link, and she kind of decides that, like, Dave's a good guy, and she's got a thing for Dave now. And at the end of the movie, they're all back at Dave's house. They're all swimming in the swimming pool, which is filled up with water from the rain, I believe. And Robin and Dave kiss, and it seems like happily ever after for those two. And then all of a sudden, Stoney and Link go up to inside the house and realize that there is another cave woman who, I guess, there was an earthquake earlier in the night. Somehow, now there's another cave woman, I guess, who was in another block of ice who is also thawed out. And so the same process that they kind of went through on realizing that the caveman, or initially Link, had thawed out and ran upstairs and been inside the house. That's what happened again. She thawed out and she ran inside and she'd been inside the house. And they go in there and she's like in the bath. And Link hops in the bath with her. And then ultimately, he's all happy that his old girlfriend from the ancient times when he lived as a caveman is now there with him, and they have somehow both survived in ice all these years, and she gets basically a makeover in the same way that he did, and now she's made to look like a 90s chick, high school chick, and there's a big hug at the end, and Link looks at the camera, and then there's a freeze frame, and that's the end of the movie. Yeah, there's nothing. That's pretty much the film. It's just kind of like a teen. It's just like a teen thing. It's just a teen story. It's a basic whatever. Kind of like I said on another episode. We'll get into that in a minute. We're fixing to get into the nuts and bolts and the nitty gritty of things. But that's a quick rundown of the film. With that said, we can now jump right into the final verdict, where we put the film to the test across 10 categories, scored on a scale from 1 to 5, and the scale looks like this: 1 is poor, 2 is weak, 3 is fair, 4 is good, and 5 is excellent. And those can be scored, I have decided, with decimals anywhere in between there. I can give it a 0.3, 0.4, I can score it however I want, as long as it falls in there. But those whole numbers there, or whatever you want to call it, are what I have just described. And then all that gets added up on the verdict scale to see where it lands. From 10 to 20 is a return. From 20 to 30 is return worthy, unless you're feeling a little bit nostalgic. And then 30 to 40 is leans rewatch, but debatable. And 40 to 50 is a certified rewatchable film. With that said, let's jump into story and plot. And I've decided this time, usually I come into this and I give this a score beforehand. But I've decided now I am not going to score it, or for this one, I'm not going to score it coming in. I'm going to score it in real time and see how that goes. So, moving right into story and plot. My feelings on the story and plot is, it's basically, let's look over the category here. Is the narrative compelling and coherent? Does it still hold up on a rewatch? Okay. I think it is a compelling and coherent narrative, and it does hold up on a rewatch. There's not a lot of depth to the story. Again, this is like a surface level teen happening where there's a caveman involved, and then like part of the story is him being a legit straight out of the ice caveman and kind of adjusting and adapting to things and becoming more whatever you want to call it, modernized, and trying to learn the ways and learn how to act and learn how to do all that. So part of the story is that. Part of the story is Dave and Stoney's friendship. Part of the story is Dave and his wanting to be with Robin, who has been friends with since he was a little kid. And part of the story is David and Stoney wanting to be cool. So there's like multiple facets here of the story, but there's not really any major thing in the story. So there's like a lot of story with not a lot of story, though it is a compelling narrative and a coherent narrative. It all makes sense. It's just not necessarily very deep, and but I do think it still holds up on a rewatch. It's a funny movie. There's some funny stuff. I can appreciate it as a teen comedy, which is what it's for. And I think like a lot of films like this, people look at them like this had a 17% on the critic scoring or whatever. A lot of people look at this and go, I don't like it because it's not what I want it to be, or it's not fancy enough of a film, or it's not a deep enough film, or it's like sometimes you just gotta watch these movies and go, hey, I'm gonna like take this for what it is. It's a silly teen comedy that's not really meant to be real deep. It's just meant to kind of be sort of kind of funny and like be watchable. You know, that's really all it is. Like, can we get some likable characters in there and people give a likable performance, and that's pretty much it. So, like, you don't necessarily need some super deep story, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. So for story and plot, because I do think it is at least a narrative, a compelling narrative, and it is a coherent story, at least, even though it's not real deep, and it does hold up on a rewatch. I'm giving this story and plot, I'm going to give it a 3.8, because it's not real deep. There's not a lot to it, but at the same time, it's not some nonsense thing that doesn't make sense. If you can accept that a caveman has been frozen in ice, I don't know, 10, 15 feet below the dirt in California for however many years, and he somehow survived. And not only that, but when he thaws out, he immediately comes to and is functional. If you can buy that, which, again, totally fictional story, then the rest of it is not an issue. Not that you have to buy that, you know what I mean? It's not that you have to believe it, you just have to buy into that story, and that this is the story being told, and now I'm not going to accept that that's the story being told, and here we are, let's go. Like, that's what I'm getting at. So I'm giving this a 3.8 out of 5. Now, moving on to characters and performances. Are the characters memorable and well acted, or forgettable and flat? I think this is where this movie shines, is the performance of these people. First of all, I got to thinking as I was watching it, I thought, oh, Brendan Fraser just played a goofy caveman. And then the more I got to thinking about it, I thought, no, he had to deliver an entire performance without being able to say a word for the most part. Yes, he did say some words, but you get what I'm saying. Like, he wasn't able to, like, dialogue and get his emotions and get his feelings across and use actual fully formed sentences and all that. He was not able to do any of that. So everything he did, his entire performance was without words, and there was deep emotion in his performance. There was, you know, kind of torment and confusion and like a whole, and there was a whole, you know, a whole gamut of emotions that you watched him go through as this person who was completely out of his element and had no clue what was going on, and trying to figure it out and scared and all that. So, like, really great job. You know, Brendan Fraser's is, again, he's another one that I would just say is like a national treasure. The dude has not really ever done anything that I'm like have any problem with or have not been a fan of and wanted to go back and watch. I think he's great in just about anything I've ever seen him in. But yeah, I think like definitely well acted. You've got Sean Astin, who's like delivers a solid performance, but it's not that he gives your typical. He's kind of like the grounded, basic person in the film, who's like the normal dude, but then also has to like get into the selfish stuff and get into you know, the sides of things that aren't just necessarily normal dude. But I don't really know what I'm saying there, to be honest with you. But Sean Astin's performance is nothing spectacular, but at the same time, it is like fitting and fine. Pauly Shore is doing the Pauly Shore thing, and there's so much about Pauly Shore in that, like that era Pauly Shore. Whether you look back on it now and go, it's super silly and dumb and whatever, and I don't like the way that he talks and the way he acts and dresses and all that, the reality is he was hugely popular in those roles, acting that way. So that there's a large part of that like does make the movie, and the dynamic of the friendship between the two, where you've got this more like straight-laced dude in Sean Astin's character Dave, and like the the far out dude in Pauly Shore, and then like they have to come together as best friends who are dealing with this situation. So anyway, I think like they're great together. Brendan Fraser's great. I think that the dude, I can't remember his name, but the dude that plays the jock boyfriend of Robin plays it great. There's some really funny stuff with him. The scene where Dave is looking at her, and then he comes in from the side of the frame and just like gets right in between. Basically, he didn't get between Dave and Robin, but his face slides in, as in like, hey, I see you're looking at my chick. What are you doing, man? It's a comical little spot there, but he does a really good job. I think there's like the characters are enjoyable characters, and their performances that they give are great and fitting for the film, and really elevate the film. I don't think the film would be what it is had it not been for what they gave to it. So, for characters and performances, I am going to give it a 4. I'm going to say 4.2. And I'm giving it a 4.2. That might seem a little high for some people. I'm giving it a 4.2 because, like I said, I don't think had it not been for their performances, this film would not be worth watching. It would be a complete and total waste of time. But they make the film. Moving on to pacing and entertainment value. Were you entertained the whole time? Did the movie keep your attention? Does it feel too slow, too rushed, or just right? I think I was entertained the whole time. It's not necessarily a super exciting film. It has its up moments, but it's never, I don't think it ever really has any super dull moments. It kept my attention, I would say, still. Does it feel too slow, too rushed, or just right? I would say, okay, to be honest with you, there are moments that I think feel a little slow-ish. I don't think anything feels too rushed at all, but there's moments that feel a little slow-ish, but I wouldn't necessarily call them slow moments that like drag the movie down. For me, anyway. So, pacing and entertainment value, I am going to... there's nothing super special about it. I'm going to give it a... I'm going to give it a 3.3. How about that? 3.3 for pacing and entertainment value. Dialogue and quotability. Are there iconic or memorable lines? Do people still quote it? Does the dialogue feel natural or cringy? Okay, here's what I was thinking about this. I think that there's more memorable from just this era of Pauly Shore. Because if you start quoting the things, if you start quoting like basically Son-in-Law, Pauly Shore in Son-in-Law, and Pauly Shore in this, you could start throwing out like the silly talk and the silly ad-lib stuff that he does and the things that he says, and I wouldn't necessarily probably be 100% sure which of those films that you're even talking about, but I know that you're talking about one or the other more than likely, and because they were his two biggest films of this era, and they're very memorable. It's very memorable him talking about munching on some grindage, and it's very memorable him talking about, you know, let me whisper into your lobes, or talking about your head, and, you know, talking about people's melons and all that. Like, it's memorable, but as far as there being any memorable lines outside of Pauly Shore, or even the Pauly Shore getting Link in the movie to talk like him, there's nothing necessarily that's like memorable lines or quotable from the film apart from that era of Pauly Shore talking like the nonsense that kids are starting to talk now. I can appreciate that then too, though. There was like more of a caricature of it then. It was like intentional entertainment then. Now the way the kids talk, and this might get me in trouble or somebody might not like me for saying this, but the stuff that in the way that the kids talk now with all the bussing and the cap and the whatever, like I can't, it drives me insane. It makes me want to like put my head through a brick wall. They're serious about it though, more like that's how they have conversations. This is not how people had conversations. This was Pauly Shore doing his own thing, his own caricature. That's not how he talks like a normal, like that's not how he has conversation. That's not how he talks. This was like his thing that he developed, a character that he developed that was part of MTV. It was part of stuff that was going on. So I don't think necessarily, like I said, that there's anything super iconic or memorable outside of Pauly Shore when it comes to dialogue and quotability for this film. But people still do quote the Pauly Shore stuff from this film at times. And does the dialogue feel natural or cringy? There's some cringe behind that, definitely. The rest of the dialogue feels natural. It's like, but the Pauly Shore stuff has some definite cringe to it. So it's like hard to judge this, because like, am I judging the film, or am I just basically judging Pauly Shore's character in multiple films here? If I'm sticking with the film, I'm gonna say, I'm just gonna put this like at a basic 3 for dialogue and quotability. Right? It's like nothing in it that is terrible. There's nothing in it that's super memorable. There's no major, oh, that's such a well written piece of, back and forth there that they had. Like, no, it's just a silly teen comedy. And I've got to set aside the fact that Pauly Shore himself and his way of talking was really popular, and try to just go straight with the movie itself. And if I set aside Pauly Shore completely, then no, there's nothing memorable or iconic about any of the dialogue in the film. So that takes us to soundtrack and score. Does the music enhance the film or date it? Does it elevate the emotional tone of the film or feel out of place? Is it iconic or generic? All right, so as far as the score goes, let's start with does the music enhance the film or date it? I feel like that's a false binary there that you're giving me. Because, I think the music can enhance the film and also date it. The music that is in the movie definitely dates it to the era that it came out. There's a lot of that music that I don't even know, but I know is, from that era. It was probably popular then. It was probably playing on the radio. But then there's some stuff that's, iconic music that people still listen to today that's really popular, that was also in the film. But there's a lot of popular pop culture music in this film that does date the film a bit, but I think it also enhances the film. So I'm going to split that down the middle. Does it elevate the emotional tone of the film or feel out of place? I don't think there's anything that feels out of place in this film. I can really appreciate the moments where Link was kind of having a throwback mental time of realizing where he came from, and when he was walking around the museum and looking at stuff, even when at the beginning of the movie when he was running around the house kind of as the caveman covered in mud, the sort of whistly fluty music that sounded like it just put you kind of it made you feel cavemanish or very primitive, I guess, if you want to say. So I think that worked, and I don't think it's iconic. The score itself, that stuff is really fitting, but it's also, I don't know that I would just call it generic. But nothing feels out of place. It's done well. I can appreciate the music that they picked. It fit for what they're doing. So for soundtrack and score, I'm gonna throw this at just I'm gonna say 3.5. I can do a 3.5. I'm good with that. Moving on to cinematography and visual style. Is it visually engaging or stylish, regardless of effects budget or genre? Do the camera work and effects still impress, or do they look dated or clunky? Okay, so visually engaging or stylish. I wouldn't say there's any real stylized shooting in this film. There's nothing that, we're not talking Dutch angles. We're not talking, low angles or particular POV shots that would be very stylish. Other than there is one shot, I believe, that's supposed to be the POV of Link, and it's a little more shaky, as if he's kind of determining who Dave and Stoney are, if I can remember correctly. It's like when they first come in. So there's like one of those little kind of quick, shaky POV shots. But there's nothing super stylized in this movie that I can remember. There is no super special camera work. From an effects perspective, I mean, there's makeup and stuff that involves. It's not prosthetic or anything of that nature, but there's not a lot of like real effects heavy anything. Anything that is there is not really even noticeable as an effect, and it's the way it should be if that's the case. So I don't know how they flipped the car up on its side and got it to ride on its wheels, the DMV car, or not the DMV car, but the driver's ed car. I don't know how that happened. Maybe there's some cables involved with that. I don't really know how that would work. I didn't look into it enough. At least they got the car driving on two wheels and made it look like it. So I can at least appreciate that. But there's nothing special about there's nothing special about the cinematography. There's nothing special about the visual style. There's nothing bad about any of it, but there's nothing special about any of it. So I would say that I'm just going to put this like smack dab at a 3 and just put it, it's just fair for cinematography and visual style. It's not to take away from anything. It's just there's not a lot to really talk about. This was a low budget, sort of basic shot film that was just simply telling a teen story. It wasn't necessarily the way that they shot it wasn't necessarily trying to tell any of the story for you or evoke anything or do anything like that. So, yeah, I'm giving cinematography and visual style a 3 out of 5. Moving on to originality and creativity. Does the film feel fresh and inspired or like something you've seen 100 times? Was the film groundbreaking or formulaic? Does it bring something unique? I don't know. Does the film feel fresh and inspired? I don't think there's maybe a different take on something like this, but this is definitely not the first time a story like this has been done where there's been some sort of out of the norm character that is trying to figure out life in the new world or the new surroundings that they've come into. Maybe the first time they did it with like a teen film like this, but that's just kind of the same thing I talked about with Teen Wolf. I mean, it's not the first time, but maybe the first approach of that angle, I guess. But no, I don't think that the film is like super fresh and inspired. And I don't think I don't think it's something necessarily I've even seen 100 times either. I don't think it was really groundbreaking, but it may be a little formulaic from the teen movie aspect. Does it bring something unique? I don't know. I don't know that it's a super new, no. The original, okay. Does the film feel fresh and inspired? Not necessarily. Is it something you've seen, does it seem like something you've seen 100 times or whatever? Was the film groundbreaking or formulaic? No, and maybe a little bit. Does it bring something unique? Not necessarily. So, I'm giving it originality and creativity in real time right here. I'm going to give it I'm going to say 2.5 out of 5. You may disagree with me. I'm struggling with that one, to be honest with you, but that's where I'm putting it, and we're just going to move right on. Theme and message. Is there a deeper takeaway, and does it explore ideas that resonate today? Okay, well, I think there's a lot more here in messaging than which there a lot of times are in teen movies, but you definitely have a story of set aside that they are pretending this guy's a foreign exchange student and he's not. You have a person who needs help, who needs direction, who needs guidance, who does not know how to do things. So they take the guy in, realizing that this is a human being and he needs help and we don't know what to do, but we're going to do our best. So like that's a good understanding or a good way to approach someone in that situation, is like take on the responsibility of trying to give them as much help as you can in that situation. But there's a lot to the friendship stuff in here, about, not elevating other things above your friends, elevating the things that come and go. So there's a little bit of that messaging there. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily trying to be super deep with any of this, but also any kind of teen movie like this ultimately seems to always come back to like, the best friend, the person that, that people were forsaking certain people for popularity or if I could just have this thing or this person or this whatever. So you always see stuff like that in the teen movies. So I'm just going to say theme and message, I'm just going to give it a 3 out of 5. There's some messaging there that if you can pull out that is positive as far as relationship stuff. I don't mean necessarily romantic relationship. I just mean like interpersonal relationships. How to treat people and making sure that you're doing what's right by others and not putting yourself above everything. Moving on to cringe factor. Any jokes, effects, or moments that haven't aged well or were always bad. Moments that make you wince now. Maybe campy, cheesy, bad effects, outdated jokes that aren't funny, etc. I think a lot of the Pauly Shore stuff is very cringe, especially now. I don't know that there's any jokes in particular or effects stuff or moments that haven't aged well. There's a particular moment I'm not even going to bring up because it doesn't bother me. Like it's something a character like that would say, and so there's some things where people are like, you shouldn't even say that word, or you shouldn't say that. Like people get really upset over stuff, and if this stuff can't be a reflection of like reality in some sense of like this guy's a jerk and he's going to say jerk things. He's going to call people certain names. He's going to do this. Like if you can't let those characters be those characters and you have to get all bothered by everything, then like we see things very differently when it comes to like art and filmmaking and letting characters be characters. But anyway, the movie itself, like the premise is there's some cringe to it. Pauly Shore's a little cringy. It's got that early 90s teen cringe. I mean, there's the dance at the end that they all do together that's like choreographed, and that's a little cringe. I am going to put this on the cringe factor at I'm going to say 2.8 out of 5 on the cringe factor scale, if it's a scale that we're going on here. For cringe factor, I'm giving it 2.8 out of 5. Moving on to nostalgia and rewatchability. Does it hold up to your memory of it? Does it still matter today? Is it timeless, or has it aged poorly? Does a rewatch ruin the magic? And would you honestly watch it again? Okay. Does it hold up to your memory of it? Yeah. I mean, it is what I remember it being, and it didn't like let me down watching it. I wasn't expecting this super duper awesome movie, and then I got let down. Like I remember it just being a silly comedy about a caveman guy and some friends that happen upon him, and then deal with his figuring things out and them trying to hide him and them trying to hide the truth and all that stuff. So, yeah, it holds up to my memory of it. Does it still matter today? I don't know about that. I think it matters today in the fact that it was kind of the kickoff for Brendan Fraser, who went on to do some great stuff. The Mummy alone maybe wouldn't have happened with him, and that's one of my all-time favorite films. But from like a film industry standpoint, does it like still matter today or culturally or whatever? I don't know that it necessarily does. Is it timeless? I wouldn't say it's timeless. It's fun. I think it's a movie that I don't think is necessarily like because of when it was made in its era, going to be less enjoyable or less watchable by any means. So I don't think it's a timeless film necessarily in the what I believe this is talking about, or like we would go like that's just a timeless classic. Like I wouldn't say that's the case. Has it aged poorly? I don't even think it's aged poorly. I think like it's fine. Does a remake or rewatch ruin the magic? No, it kind of is what it is. Would you honestly watch it again? Yeah, I've watched it a couple. Like this is the second time. This is probably the second time in about a year and a half or so that I watched this movie. So for nostalgia and rewatchability, I'm gonna say yes. We got a yes there for one question. I'm gonna say I'm giving it a 3.2 out of 5 for me, for nostalgia and rewatchability. Now, with that all down, let's run through these real fast again. All right, story and plot, I gave a 3.8 out of 5. Characters and performances, I gave a 4.2 out of 5. Pacing and entertainment value, I gave a 3.3 out of 5. Dialogue and quotability, I gave a 3 out of 5. Soundtrack and score, I gave a 3.5 out of 5. Cinematography and visual style, I gave a 3 out of 5. Originality and creativity, a 2.5 out of 5. Theme and message, I gave a 3 out of 5. Cringe factor, 2.8 out of 5. And nostalgia and rewatchability, a 3.2 out of 5, bringing this to 32.3 out of 5, which means it falls between 30 and 40 and making it a leans rewatch but debatable film. And for me, again, that fits right where I would expect it, closer to the middle. If this is a 32.3, that's just a little over the... yeah, like not far above the halfway point, which is kind of where your audience score was, 56, I think. What was it, 56% on the popcorn meter? It fits about where I would expect it to go, and I think that does put it in a debatable area, and I'm sure to many people this would be very much a debatable case. People would love to debate against this being a rewatchable film, but I think a lot of people have nostalgia for it and grew up, have a kind of a soft spot for it, especially for the people that are in it, and would consider it a rewatchable film. So yes, it is a 32.3 out of 5, making it leans rewatch but debatable. All right, with all that down, that's going to be the end of this episode. Thank you guys for hanging on. If you made it to the end, I would love to know what you think about the film and your thoughts and feelings if you've seen it or if you haven't seen it. Why haven't you seen it? But if you have, I'd love to know what you think about it. If you would like to comment, if you're watching on YouTube and you want to comment below, let me know what you think. If you are listening on any of the audio-only podcast platforms, then you can go to Rewatch or Return on Instagram and go to the post that is directly related to this episode and let me know what you think in the comment section of that. Or if you are listening on audio only, you can hop over to YouTube just for commenting if you want to. But if you enjoyed this and you enjoy this podcast and talking about movies and listening to people talk about movies and just picking movies apart and having fun with it, then share this with people that you know that you might like it themselves. That's always helpful for the podcast to get it out to new people. Either way, it is much appreciated that you would make it to the end of this, and I am still enjoying this and have no end in sight so far. So thank you for hanging on, and I will see you next week.